So, out of all of the precious resources that exist on our planet, fresh water, gold, fossil fuels, there was one time in my life where one resource became very, very valuable to me precisely because of how rare it had become. And that was toilet paper. Now, that's right, you heard me. Remember the first few weeks of the pandemic when for some reason everyone and their brother was stockpiling toilet paper like it was the end of the world? It was a weird time. But during this time, I was in Detroit with all the other seminarians and priests who lived there. There was about 20 guys living together in one house, and you guessed it, we ran out of toilet paper. Now, no big deal, this happens, right? No need to panic. So the next grocery time, we just picked up some more and brought it home. But quickly we realized that disappeared too, faster than normal, and we wondered what's going on. So some of the more inquisitive seminarians started a little bit of their own investigation, and after some sleuthing, they found out the mystery. One of the priests was stockpiling it in his room. He was caught red-handed in the act. Now, under interrogation by irate seminarians, he admitted, okay, I was worried that I was going to run out in the future, and so I started hoarding it in my room. He was worried that if he shared any of it with us lowly seminarians, that there wouldn't be enough for him. So if any of you are still disillusioned with this idea that priests are somehow these paragons of charity and virtue, think again, right? We're not. Trust me, I live with them, right? And even worse, they have to live with me, right? Now, the controversy in the house eventually settled down, and since then there's been more than enough toilet paper for everyone. But isn't it true that when we're worried about our own future security, is there going to be enough for me, it's hard for us to care about the needs of others? Maybe you've looked out at our economy as it seems to continue to tank, and you've been thinking, I don't know if I have enough for even the basic needs of life. Every time I go to get gas and pump up, it goes up again. Every time I go to get groceries, that bill just is more. Am I going to have enough to make ends meet? Some of you maybe have been trying to save money for a house for a long time, and you're wondering, am I ever going to be able to do that? Am I ever going to have enough money to put my kids through university? There's a whole industry of financial planning that's designed to help people put money away for the future. But this causes still a lot of stress and concern as people wonder, do I have enough saved up for a comfortable retirement? Do you find yourself ever obsessing about money, thinking about it a lot, wondering if you'll be able to live the life that you always wanted for yourself or for your family? Maybe that you could go out to nice places to eat once in a while, that you lived in maybe a better neighborhood where you're able to go on better vacations, get a cottage, those kinds of things. And you spend a lot of your time focused on growing your investments, and yet it just never seems to be enough. Well, all these different ways that we worry about money, they can actually lead to anxiety, they can lead to stress, sleepless nights, they can even put tension into our relationships with the people that we love the most if we end up fighting about money. And a lot of these things, a lot of these anxieties, they actually stem from the sin of greed. Now, greed, that's kind of a loaded word. You know, maybe it conjures up images of Scrooge McDuck, swimming in his oceans of money, diving into bank vaults, right? And you might be thinking, well, Father Isaac, I'm not greedy. That's for billionaires and rich politicians. I don't even have enough money to be greedy about. Right? I don't have any private jets. I don't have an island mansion waiting for me somewhere in some tropical destination. Greed, that's not a problem for me. And I used to think that exact thing myself. Until one day, a wise old priest who was my spiritual director in seminary, you maybe know him, Father Simon, this Yoda-like character bestowing wisdom upon this young seminarian, he gave me this book that is actually one of my favorite spiritual books of all time. And in it, it talks about the 7 deadly sins, of which greed is one of them. And it talks about how with every single deadly sin, it always starts with a lie that you believe in your heart. And the lie that greed tells us is this, that happiness comes from being materially secure, from having material security. That the sin of greed is rooted in this lie that without being financially secure, you cannot be happy. And the priest who wrote this, Father Dennis Lemieux, he puts it so brilliantly. He says, for most people, because we're not wealthy, the thought of greed is less that kind of cackling delight in our riches and more thoughts of anxiety about the future. So it's less, counting your billions alone in your room and more anxiety. Will I have enough for the future? Greed is essentially thinking and living as if money will make you happy. And greed can slowly but surely choke your spiritual life with anxiety about the future, and it even has the power to stop you from being generous. Why? Well, because if you believe the lie that greed tells you, that if I'm not financially secure, there's no way I'll be happy, well, then it's going to be very hard for you to give any of your hard-earned money away to those who are in need. If you're struggling to make ends meet, then maybe the thought of giving to the church, it doesn't even cross your mind. Now, I want to take a step back here and just say a couple things. First of all, I am very aware that this is a very generous parish. Like, there is a real spirit of generosity here. Many of you give even sacrificially to make sure that the mission of this parish goes on. And I'm not ignorant to that. It's really beautiful and edifying to see. And none of what takes place here would be able to take place without your generosity. I also want to make sure that you know that, it's not wrong to own things, right? It's not wrong to have money. It's not wrong to own property. It's not wrong to invest or be financially secure. It's actually a very good and holy and virtuous thing to work hard and to provide for your family, to provide for yourself. There's nothing wrong or greedy about managing your finances wisely. However, as soon as you start to place your confidence, as soon as you start to place your happiness that it's based on the fact of how much money you have, then you start to slip into the powerful temptation of greed. Well, if greed isn't the solution, then what are we supposed to put our trust in? If it's not money, then what is it? Well, in the psalm that we heard today, it says, "It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to put confidence in humans, than to put confidence in princes." Now, for those of you who've been to church for a while, you should have seen that coming, right? It's not money, it's the Lord. Of course, why didn't I get that right? It's kind of like when you're in Sunday school and you kind of zone out and the teacher asks you a question and you kind of wake up. If you answer Jesus, you're probably going to be correct, right? It's kind of like that. But how exactly do we put our trust in the Lord as opposed to humans or princes? I don't think anyone in this room has put your undying, unshakable confidence in Prince William, right? So what exactly is going on here? Well, don't put your trust in humans means don't put your trust in human efforts. Don't put your trust in human planning and human wisdom. Don't put your trust in princes. Well, the rich, the powerful, the wealthy, that's who the princes are. Those who seem to have it all together. You can see how this can easily be applied to greed. Don't put your trust entirely in your investment plans. Don't have your confidence rest on how much wealth you've been able to store up. Don't take refuge, which means don't hide away in safety, in your financial security. But rather, put your confidence, put your faith, put your trust in the Lord as someone who can be your refuge. Why is the psalm telling us to do this? Well, because only the Lord is able to provide that place of refuge for us. Jesus himself describes himself as, "I am the good shepherd." This beautiful image that Jesus reveals part of the character of God to us, that I am the good shepherd, which means Jesus is saying, I'm trustworthy, I'm reliable, I don't change, and I love my sheep. I will take care of those that belong to me. And so if we place our trust in Jesus as the Good Shepherd, he will be able to remove the anxieties and the stresses about the future that we carry. Because remember, greed isn't just about money. It's rather that idea, that temptation. Money leads to happiness, and there's no limit to greed if you think about it. People who have nothing can be greedy, thinking to themselves, if I just get enough to get by, then I'll be happy. All the way up to the billionaire who says, if I build one more mansion, then I'll be happy. It's the same lie. It's the same sin with both. That lie that happiness is based on stuff. And if you're financially secure, whatever it looks like, then you'll be happy. And so you're always anxious about accumulating more wealth or anxious about losing the wealth you've already got. But if you've put your refuge in the Lord, if you've put your trust in him as your good shepherd, then all of that anxiety begins to fade away because you're confident you belong completely to a God who loves you, the God who created the universe, and you can trust your future to him. So how do you put your trust concretely in God? What does this actually look like rather than putting your trust in money? Well, it can be really easy to convince yourself that you don't struggle with greed. If all it is looking at our own hearts to figure out what's going on there, none of us are very good at that. So a really concrete way to see if you struggle with greed is to try to be generous in giving your money to the church and then see what flares up in your own heart. Giving money to the church, which will be used for the mission of the parish, that's a very active way to fight the tendency that all of us have towards greed in our hearts. And this is because when you give money to the church, you're saying with your actions itself, not your words, your actions, you're saying, God, I don't believe the lie that money is where my happiness ultimately comes from. I don't believe that lie. I believe that you are my good shepherd. I can't buy my happiness, and I'm going to entrust you with my money because I believe that you have my future, and I put my confidence in you. That's what happens when you're generous. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but there is no better way to fight greed in your life than to give some of your hard-earned money away to the mission of the church, to help make disciples and to help take care of the poor and the needy, those who need it most. The temptation of greed will tell you the lie, because happiness is based on material security, you can't give any of it away. You can't risk your future. But tithing, giving away money, it proclaims the truth. No, God is my shepherd. I trust him. And I had to learn this lesson for myself. You know, when I was in seminary, this is a picture of when I first joined seminary, minus the beard, you know. That's what I look like without a beard, by the way. And a backwards hat. I was so cool, right? And you might have noticed Father Dan's in that picture too. We both joined together. So I'm 19 at this time. And I joined seminary, and for 10 years, Father Dan and I, we didn't make hardly any money. We didn't have really any income. And it was actually kind of embarrassing for me because in order to make it through school, in order to make it through seminary, I had to ask other people for money. And it was really hard for my pride, especially when all of my friends from high school were going off and becoming successful and getting into business. And there's Isaac, another year of asking people for money to become a priest, right? And I had always given money to charity, to the mission of the church, but it was always sporadic when I felt like it, and it never felt easy. It was always something I did grudgingly, and it was always based on if I had enough for me. And I had so many different excuses not to give money to the church. One of the main ones was, well, I'm giving my whole life to God as a priest, right? So I can keep the money for myself. That was what I would tell myself. But when I came here to the parish as a priest, in my first year, Father Simon actually had a conversation with me, and he challenged me to make the decision to tithe. And if you haven't heard the word tithe, tithe just means this biblical principle of giving 10% of your income back to God. And I resisted that idea at first for all of the reasons that I had in seminary, and now I had more ones. Like, you know, I'm out of seminary, I have new expenses, I can't be irresponsible about the future, but I finally have a salary, I finally have money now, so now's the time to save. And I realized that all of these things that I was thinking, they were just rationalization. They were just things I was trying to say to convince myself not to give generously. It was just greed popping its ugly head up in my own heart. And so last year, I decided to tithe. To actively fight the greed that is in my own heart, I put aside my anxiety and my stress about money, and I decided to give 10% of my income back to God. And guess what? My future wasn't destroyed. I still had more than enough money for everything I needed. The only thing that was destroyed was my irrational fear that if I gave away any of my money, that I would not be happy. I didn't realize how much confidence I had put in money until I started to give. Greed had become a very hidden sin for me. But now, after making that choice to tithe, I found that I think about money less, and I actually have a lot of happiness as a result of it. Now, maybe some of you are like me. There might be some greed in your heart that's hiding in plain sight. Well, what if this week you made a decision to tithe, to be more generous with God than you have been before, to put your trust in the Good Shepherd in this concrete way? Wouldn't it be great if you could experience that happiness that comes from having a generous heart that has found its confidence not in humans, not in princes, but in God himself?